That's why I started this podcast, Leslie, so I can grow as a leader. But it's incredibly interesting as well. But selfishly, I'm like, all of these people are so successful. I want to take these things that they've done and apply it to my own business. So, and then bring it to the world.
I love it. That's what we try to do, is inspire other people. Like I was inspired and still am inspired by others.
You can't stop, right? That's part of being an entrepreneur. And do you identify as the entrepreneur?
Definitely. I'm definitely an entrepreneur, 100%. Yes.
And did you addicted? When did you start?
I started probably 30 years ago being an entrepreneur. Yeah, that's when I started. So the story basically is that I was working in PR in New York City, and I was working in corporate. I was running PR for some big brands like Sony, for example. And a bunch of things happened to me personally. I had my apartment was robbed, which really sucked at the time. But the result of that is I got some insurance money from the things that they stole. And that gave me the impetus to quit my job and to jump on an airplane and go to Indonesia and do something I always wanted to do, which was to travel through the beautiful islands of Indonesia. And I had the money to do it. I had the time to do it. And I jumped on a plane and just did it. And that was in my early 30s. So I've been an entrepreneur for a really long time.
Wow. How amazing. So you realized that the money that was used to replace those items didn't need to be replaced. And you took a life leap and you created a life through exploration, and then your business back to Bali.
From Bali, yeah. Well, what happened was I went on the trip and I was traveling for 7 months, and then I needed to return back to New York, which is where I was living, and get a job because, I had been away for 7 months. Okay, I'm back. What am I going to do? And I started looking in the newspaper, which is how you found jobs back then. And I was looking through the newspaper and I'm turning the pages there and I'm scrolling down, and there's just not one job I wanted to take. And I had one of those light bulb moments where I remembered this beautiful handmade clothing I had seen when I was traveling during those 7 months in Bali, Indonesia. And I just asked myself the question which changed my life, which was, I wonder what would happen if I went back to Bali and bought those clothes and brought it back to the US. I wonder. And that is how I became an entrepreneur, was by asking myself that question.
And were you obsessed with it? Like, tell me about that part. So you asked that question, and then how long would you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it? Like, I love that early part of an idea.
Yeah, I was sitting on the bed with the New York Times in front of me, looking through the job section. I then had this idea, wow, I saw this beautiful clothing in Bali, Indonesia. They were children's clothes. And Indonesia is really famous for making batik, which is a type of fabric using wax and dye, really colorful with moons and stars and all kinds of animals on it. And I just remembered it, and I thought, what would happen if I did this? What would happen if I jumped on a plane and did it? And I took out a calculator. I punched in numbers. How much would it cost for me to fly back? How much would it cost for me to stay there? How much would it cost for me to bring it back? And then how am I going to sell it? And then I thought, New York has a lot of street fairs and markets. How much do markets cost? What do I need to buy for the market? Well, you need a table, you need a chair, I'm going to have to hire a van, all these things. I just started punching numbers and how much I thought I could sell things for. And I realized that there is no way I wasn't going to make money unless the goods were stolen. There was just no way I would make money.
Yeah.
And with that, I literally, and within a week, I was back in Indonesia.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That is so cool. So you went right back. That's the biggest mistake, is people sit and they wait too long at the the edge of the building, sort of, right? Or the edge of the cliff. What did your family say?
I don't know.
Yeah, you're like, I didn't ask permission.
I'm trying to remember. This is 30 years ago. What did my family say? I think, my parents are both entrepreneurs. So this is, I didn't come from a family of corporate workers and people who stuck in jobs and things like that. So I came from a family where my dad was an entrepreneur, my mom was an entrepreneur, and so it would be more encouraged to do something like that than not. So it wasn't really a matter. I see you asked that question, and because most people have maybe doubts, like should I do it, or maybe I shouldn't, or what would people think, or what would my family think, or I didn't have any of those thoughts, because my only thought was it was either this or it was getting a job in New York City again. And I didn't really need to discuss that with anybody, because the idea of getting a job again was so awful to me that the other idea of taking this risk and a chance and doing something I had no idea if it would work was my only option.
Wow. How do you remember that feeling? I love how you remember this 7-day time period. Do you remember that feeling that you had? Like, was it excitement? Was it optimism?
Yeah, it's exciting and fun and adventure. And it meant I get to go back to this country that I fell in love with. It meant that I, get to try something new. So to me, like I said, I did some homework. I took out that calculator. I punched numbers in. It's not like I didn't know what I was doing. I realized that this would work unless it was stolen. That was the only way it wouldn't. So the risk to me was, I didn't really see the risk at all. So it was just pure excitement to do something like that. But what I didn't know is how it would sell. I didn't know if anyone was like Moons and Star, jumpers and rompers for babies. I didn't know that. So that was the surprise part, was would it sell? Would people want to buy it?
Yeah. So what'd you do? What'd you next? How'd you sell it when you started out?
Yeah, so there were street fairs in New York City. So I registered for a street fair. I bought a folding table. I schlepped the stuff in a taxi cab. I threw it on the table. I had no sales experience at all. I never sold anything. It was not what I did in public relations before. And my mom had sales experience. And so she helped me that day because the booth was literally attacked by women screaming and grabbing things and wanting them. And I was completely overwhelmed by the interest. And at the end of the day, I had I think it was $800 cash in my hand. And I was like, whoa, this is really fun. And I think I did another street fair the next day. And then I needed to go back to Bali because I could see I was going to be sold out really soon. And so that's what happened. So I went back again.
And then you had enough to probably double or triple your amount of inventory.
Yeah,
brought it back.
It started small like that. I brought more back. I went back there and made relationships. I made relationships with manufacturer there where she was really manufacturing most of this kind of clothing I loved. So I started making relationships with how I'm going to ship it back, UPS. So you start step by step by step, very small steps, but you start that way. And then, there was a time where I didn't have to go back, that I was able to through, connecting at that time was really through fax, actually, that I could make orders and then it just sort of grew. And then I continued to do markets and street fairs and holiday markets and all of that for a really long time. And I also did wholesaling. So I was selling into large department stores, a business I don't recommend at all, wholesaling at all. And that is kind of how the business grew and just took off from there. And then the product line changed, and I changed the product line completely about 11 years ago and left children's clothes and then went into women's clothes. So my product now is called Back from Bali. So I manufacture women's bohemian style clothing and manufacture everything there, bring it into the US and sell it primarily on my website and on Amazon. So I'm 100% e-commerce.
And you are 8 figures successful.
Seven
Figures.
Seven.
Successful in e-commerce and Amazon business, which is so hard to break into e-commerce. I mean, that's like hats off to you. And then you did a pivot. Why'd you do that pivot 11 years ago from children's to women's? What were you seeing there?
Because I wanted to wear the stuff.
That makes sense. I like it.
That's why, I did children's and it was really cute and adorable and all that stuff. And I loved it and enjoyed it. But, I was then much more interested in the kind of women's clothes that I was finding in Indonesia and in Bali. And I just thought, why don't I start doing women's? Why don't I start bringing in the clothing that I love to wear there? The embroidery work that they did there, the batik work also that they did for adults. And, like, oh, I could wear that and I could wear that. And this is so cute and this is so comfortable. And I bet other women would love this too. And, I just really enjoyed fabrics. I enjoyed touching them and feeling them and going to fabric stores and buying the fabrics and working with the vendors. And one of the beautiful things about working in Bali, Indonesia, is that I don't work with any factories and I work really only with very small businesses. And normally they're just women owned, actually. And I love that part of it as well. So it's everything is ethically made in Bali. And, as the business grew and grew and grew and grew, in the last few years, I started to do more consulting and I started to really kind of help other women entrepreneurs answer the question is how do you build a successful business and how do you build, a multiple 7-figure business? And that is the reason why I wrote my book, which will be coming out this fall, which I'm really excited about.
That is, so in 30 years, you've built essentially 2 different categories of business and then launched them in e-commerce and Amazon, created 2 different brands, and then now a book. Now you're an author. And your book, what inspired you to write a book?
Because I had all this knowledge that was just like sitting inside of me because my story kind of in a nutshell is even though I've been an entrepreneur for a really long time, like 30 years, I've only been let's call it a successful entrepreneur really for the last, 8 years or something, 9 years or something like that. And, so as of, 10, 11 years ago, even though I had my business and even though it gave me some money, it gave me a lot of freedom and it gave me a lot of values that I have that I loved, it just was not giving me really financial success. And I got to a point in my early 50s where I felt like, Leslie, you could be doing better than this. I knew I could be doing much better. I could try harder. I could be smarter. I could learn more. I could want more. And I made a really conscious decision that I was going to build a business and be really successful and make lots of money. I just decided that was it. And that's what I did. And so I changed the product line a little bit earlier than that, but I really started implementing all of these activities and ideas and action steps and mindset and ways of doing things. And then it brought me to where I am now, which is a multiple 7-figure business. And so a few years ago, I started to think, let me share with other women entrepreneurs really how to do this and what the steps were that I did to take it. And look, I did it in my 50s. And so you could do this at any age. It's not like you have to be 20 to do it or 40 to do it. You could be 60 to do it. It's just whether you want to do it. And that really is step number 1.
Oh, So inspiring, Leslie. I hope someone's listening to this and is like, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to do this. And that they realize that it's their own self-limiting